good evening if you are in the Eastern Mediterranean and other parts of the world. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you back in this collaborative effort that we've put together over the last week. This is our second annual George E. Danis seminar on security and diplomacy in the Eastern Mediterranean. And this is in collaboration with the Karamanlis Chair at the Fletcher School and Professor Arvanitopoulos, who unfortunately is not with us right now, and the International Institute of International Relations of Pandia University, IDIS, and the American College of Greece and Tiri, and the National Public Administration and International Relations University of Romania in Bucharest, Romania. So this is an effort of multiple universities and institutions, and we have with us some of the contributing members in trying to wrap up this great week of discussions and hopefully fruitful kind of a thought process and thought-provoking issues. And the focus of this, or the thinking behind this roundtable discussion, as we did last year when we were concluding, was to sort of like brainstorm or really look at some of these events. And this week we've spent some time looking at the issues of climate and energy and how those things really interact with the policies on one end and the imperatives of, that both of those issues represent in the framework of geopolitics, in the framework of democracy, in the framework of regional competition, in an area that stretches from Ukraine all the way to the Red Sea and from Iran all the way to the edge of Morocco. So this Eastern Mediterranean, as has been defined even during this week, is a wider region than just the pocket that we necessarily see it geographically. So when we started out with Dr. Bechev on Monday, and he gave us this overview of what's going on especially in the whole Eurasian competition between Turkey and Russia. And we finished up earlier this morning with Dr. Tsarouchas and his perspective on looking back from a European perspective, 30 years post Maastricht. Wow, what does Europe look like, and how does Europe fit in to this conundrum that we have in front of us? We sort of looked at the wide array of issues that really encompass some of these challenges and opportunities moving forward. So without further ado, I'm sure you heard a lot of me this week, and I'm going to say as little as possible. I'm going to turn the floor over to a very good colleague from the University of Peloponnese, an associate professor and a good friend, Sotiris Roussos, and maybe Sotiris then can introduce the next speaker, which is another good friend from Athens, Dr. Konstantinos Filis, and so on and so forth. So Sotiris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad that and very honored that I have been invited once more to participate in this seminar. I think that it is a unique seminar in the sense of dealing with the Eastern Mediterranean, where we have a very few, I would like to say, venues, academic venues that are dealing with Eastern Mediterranean as a regional subsystem. And it is I think unique, together with I believe with the summer seminars of the Institute of International Relations in Athens that are dealing from the perspective of let's say Southeast Europe, Eastern Mediterranean and Southeast Europe. And this is very, very important, and I think it's unique, at least to the best of my knowledge. So I say again that I'm very happy that I'm with you tonight here in Athens, today here in Boston. Now I'm going to deal with let's say 3-1 issue. And I say why I say that it's 3-1. The first 3 issues will be on the climate change and the climate change and the energy issues, which are mostly the subject of our seminar. And in these issues, I would deal with the desertification in the northern, particularly in Northern Africa and the Sahel area, the zone southern from the Northern Africa. And the second is the water issues, particularly issues that have to do with transnational and interstate water management. And the third is going to be about the energy projects in the Eastern Mediterranean. Then my fourth, why I say 3 and 1, the fourth point will be on a proposal, let's say, for what we can do in the Eastern Mediterranean in order to face this and other problems. First, the issue of desertification. We have a growing desertification and increase of desertification in the area of Sahel, south from Algeria, in the south of Algeria, of Libya, so on and so forth, particularly in Africa, which actually create immense problems for the viability of the settled communities, increases the social inequalities, and this increase of social and socioeconomic inequalities led to two phenomena or two other developments. One is more migration flows from these areas to Europe, to the north, and so more migration pressures on the European, on the Mediterranean and the European frontiers. And second, which is of course interconnected with the socioeconomic inequalities, is the increase of, let's say, radicalism first, and organized crime second. Radicalism also in the form of jihadist organizations in Chad, in Mali, and elsewhere, even in up to the north of Burkina Faso, with destabilizing effects in the whole area and in North Africa, I would say. Also organized crime has to do with human trafficking, with drug trafficking, and illegal arms trafficking. So these are things that are intensified by the growing desertification of the area. The second is the water issues. We have seen the water issues, and we will see the management of water issues is going to be an important issue, most important. It is already an important issue, but its importance is going to increase. Why? Because with the climate change, we have a lot of floods in the area, and particularly in the big rivers, and particularly in the river of Nile. That's why we have now a great dispute between Egypt and Sudan on the one hand, and Ethiopia on the other, about the water management, the interstate water management of River Nile. It's not only that. We can remind ourselves of that one of the reasons for the Syrian upheaval, particularly the rural areas, against the Assad regime in 2011-2012, were the drought in the area and the low agricultural income. So this is also a part of great grievances. And we have also problems in the relations between Turkey, Syria, and Iraq on the management of Tigris and Euphrates. So it's a very good issue, particularly in the times of climate change. The third point is the energy projects. We had the developments on East Med the last days, last week. Konstantinos Filis can say more about this because it's an expert on these issues. The only thing that I would like to point out is that with the climate change and being in an era of, let's say, passage from the hydrocarbon, let's say, energy to green energy, it's very, I would say that the energy projects in general are a slippery ground for alliances. So we have to take into consideration this volatility of both the energy market and energy projects, and I think that it is not prudent to base regional alliances or cooperation solely on energy projects like the EastMed. Now, coming to the fourth issue, let's say 3+, is that instead of, let's say, chasing mirages in energy projects, we have to concentrate not only Greece, but also other countries in the region to a kind of collective security scheme in Helsinki for Eastern Mediterranean. It might sound a mirage itself, but I think that we can have an Eastern Mediterranean collective security scheme even without resolving the main, let's say, protracted conflict like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the Cyprus issue. And we had the Helsinki, and it was actually Helsinki managed to create kind of or to build actually confidence despite the main security issues of Cold War were not resolved at that time. So the same could happen in the case of the Eastern Mediterranean. And of course, European Union and the United States should have an interest in facilitating this project, both politically and financially. I think that it's instead of trying to play one against the other or to create alliances, triangles, or whatever, it is much better to invest in projects that have to do with cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean. And when I say with the economy on the sea, with green economy, also with intra-regional trade and investments, because it's the Eastern Mediterranean is one of the it has one of the lowest rates of intra-regional commerce and investments in the world. I think that this is how I see the correlation between climate change, energy, and security in the area. And I'll be very happy to hear our colleagues and how they see it. And particularly, as I mentioned, the EastMed project and the new developments, I would like to hear the reviews of Konstantinos Filis, who is associate professor in the Athens, the American College, and in Athens, and associate professor of international relations, and a very close friend of mine. And I think one of the few experts, true experts, I would say, true experts in energy and security in the Eastern Mediterranean. Konstantinos, may I give the floor to Konstantinos?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sotiris, for over-exaggerating in your comments regarding me, but that is the subjective approach of a good friend, of a very good friend, a very close friend. I'm really honored, Petros, for the invitation once again, and for your trust. Sotiris has set the picture regarding the Eastern Mediterranean in a very effective way. I'm going to just supplement a couple of thoughts on what Sotiris has just said, and I will focus on energy. And I'm going to raise a couple of questions, respond to them, and then I'm really looking forward to a vivid discussion with our participants. So the first question is, what are the main trends in energy issues on the global level before we bring it on a regional level? So for now, high prices and the market is taking it for granted that these price levels will be maintained through at least the first quarter of 2022. Let me very briefly give you an indication of what I just said. The natural gas nowadays is around 90 euros per megawatt, up from 15 euros at the start of 2020. The price surged to 170 euros. Now it's around 90. However, it had stabilized in the past between 18 and 30 euros. And now we feel that it is very unlikely to see that happening again for many years to come. And the projections with a relative margin of error are that the price could stabilize at around 50 euros per megawatt due to the volatility of the energy market. Right now, in fact, the European Union as a consumer is in a difficult position because its storage facilities are empty, are not that full. They should have been full around 90%, and they are up to 55 to 60%. Demand is high, and the freezing of Nord Stream 2 by Germany's regulatory authority has irritated Russia, with the latter reverting to the game of pressuring Brussels. And it is also true that there has been a fall in imports from North America, which emphasize South America to cover, for example, the needs of the Brazilian market. And also the US and Canada shifted their view towards the Asian market, which of course pays a premium of $4 to $5 per megawatt. So the final observation here is that opinions differ on the speed of the transition to cleaner forms of energy, mainly due to the higher cost and absence of storage. We have to bear that in mind. So how is the energy issue handled in the Eastern Mediterranean? Now we're going from the general and the global to specific and regional. I'll come back to natural gas later on if need be. The two ambitious and promising plans signed in recent years are the Euro-Asia Interconnector, labeled as an EU electricity highway, connecting to the grids of Israel, Cyprus, and Greece via subsea cable. In its advantages, we read from the official side that it promotes the substantial development of the renewable energy sources and contributes to the reduction of CO2 emissions. Another agreement which was signed recently is the one between Greece and Egypt on an undersea cable that will transmit power produced by renewables from North Africa to Europe. This plan is even more ambitious, and many technical and financial aspects remain to be clarified before we can assess its sustainability. So does this mean that the Eastern Mediterranean is going green? Not yet, but that is the trend. In the case of Greece, I can assure you that green energy and renewables, and actually renewables diplomacy, is developing as we speak. And for Athens, plans like the East Med have been regulated to the back burner for pragmatic reasons. We can talk about that in more detail after the non-paper that was leaked from the US State Department. And all of the experts, more experts than I, agree that if there are no immediate developments in extraction and production of natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, any mineral wealth, and specifically that of Cyprus, will remain unexploited. Meanwhile, Turkey, which is playing a counterproductive role in the matter, can circumvent financial obstacles if it is to use any quantities it discovers to meet domestic needs. And there are other drivers in the case of Turkey, and the companies involved in exploiting the hydrocarbons in the wider region will make decisions based on viability, using commercial rather than political criteria. In the Eastern Mediterranean, since the discovery of the Zohr deposit in Egypt, there hasn't been a new discovery of similar size, one that could be seen as a game changer. The Zohr deposit will cover Egypt's domestic needs. In the case of Cyprus, exploratory drilling so far has moderated expectations, with the result that Nicosia needs Egypt and/or Israel in order to export its natural gas. Israel has oriented the functioning of its domestic market towards natural gas. There is a total gasification in Israel underway, but the Leviathan energy field, which is the second largest in the Mediterranean after Zohr, has surplus quantities of natural gas on the order of 10 to 12 billion cubic meters. Given the conditions, the likelihood of the Eastern Mediterranean's mineral wealth being exported beyond regional markets is limited. And in any case, the window of opportunity for decisions on this will close in 5 years at the most. The future of the Eastern Mediterranean lies in capitalizing on renewables. So Greece, in my mind, is moving in the right direction and is credited with accelerating procedures for adaptation to Greek energy in coordination with the European Union, benefiting from capital and know-how. Quantities for sale are kind of limited. Additionally, the lack of infrastructure, with the exception of the 2 LNG terminals in Egypt, Idku and Damietta, presupposes large quantities for transportation and proper commercial utilization. And in any case, the region was not expected, and is not expected actually, to compete with Russia or other major producers. Its capacity based on existing discoveries does not exceed 20 to 30 billion cubic meters annually, while Russia supplies the European market with 150 billion cubic meters annually. So in the positive scenario, the Eastern Mediterranean could become a second Azerbaijan plus. Azerbaijan is supplying the European market with 20 billion cubic meters on an annual basis. I'm going to close with 2 more comments. First, that the prospective and contingent discoveries in Cyprus show that its deposits will not surpass 10 to 11 trillion cubic feet, while Zohr is at 30 trillion cubic feet, and Leviathan, the Israeli field, at 22 trillion cubic feet. So as I said, Cyprus's natural gas is not commercially viable for now without the backing of Israel and Egypt. So Cyprus has a problem of commercial viability and in part of security of supply. And the other observation is that Egypt, especially following the discovery of the largest deposit in the Eastern Mediterranean, Zohr, wants to play, and actually is playing, the role of production and transit hub. And another big advantage for Cairo is the 2 existing LNG terminals, I referred to them before, Idku and Damietta, which can also be used, and I would like to stress that, by neighboring producers, that is Israel and Cyprus, so that they don't have to shoulder the cost of building new ones. So bearing in mind the above, the plan most likely to be realized is the exporting of natural gas in LNG form, that is liquefied natural gas, by Egypt. Israel and Cyprus have already concluded agreements with the Egyptian authorities to transport a portion of their production to Idku and Damietta. Egypt's 2 LNG terminals, which were operating below capacity for over 5 years. So that is a good thing for Egypt and the other producers. And it should be noted that even though the LNG terminal in Alexandroupolis is an attractive destination in terms of distance and transport cost, because we are talking about liquefied natural gas, it will probably be sold to another market, or it can be probably sold to another market even outside the European Union. So Greece does not have any comparative advantage in practical terms, but of course it can secure some quantities exported by Egypt, and of course it can play the role of transportation hub or center for the Eastern Mediterranean. But in this scenario, the East Med scenario, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, is currently have been put on pause. Last but not least, Turkey is very interested in the region's hydrocarbons as a means for reducing its dependence on imports. At the same time, of course, it wants to participate in order to improve its geopolitical position, mainly aiming for inclusion in the plans of the Southern European Corridor, actually in all plans of Southern European Corridor. What is Southern European Corridor? Southern European Corridor was invented and initiated as an idea from the Europeans after the two crises between Russia and Ukraine. So in order to lessen EU's dependency on Russia, they decided to support the Southern European Corridor, which was planned to bring large quantities of natural gas from the Middle East and the Caspian Basin to Europe. But with Iran being excluded from this, the only the only alternative left has been Azerbaijan. So now we can add the Eastern Mediterranean in this planning for the Europeans, and of course the Turks want to play this role of the transit hub for the Eastern Mediterranean gas as well. But for the time being, the problem for Turkey, and I'm going to conclude with that, it cannot overcome its arrogance in order to come to an understanding with the states in the region. But of course, it is in an attempt to improve or ameliorate, in a way, its ties with Israel and Egypt. I honestly can't see how this is going to happen, at least in full, under Erdogan's leadership. But there is, of course, a process undergoing. On the one hand, Turkey is too large by regional standards to be ignored, and it must be included in the planning. On the other hand, due to the unreliability of its leadership and the distance it has put between itself and the European Union, there are serious concerns about the role it can play in the end. And at the very least, this would be to receive quantities of up to 8 billion cubic meters as a customer. So Turkey is not at last going to play the role of the transit hub, but rather be a client of natural gas coming from Eastern Mediterranean, especially Israel, maybe Egypt, and why not Cyprus, provided, of course, that the Cyprus problem is going to be solved, which is not expected to happen in the foreseeable future. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for really expanding the conversation for us even more so in the process by giving us some really factual information that's more than relevant. And I think it's sort of like, the necessary sobering facts that we need to have more of a realistic assessment of what's going on, and the policy aspects and the aspects of the demand, the market aspects as well, on both the issue of feasibility and the issue of demand, which is very, very important in the overall calculation here. As everybody's formulating questions and they would want to jump in the conversation, I would be, since this is our last session, I would be more than happy to even bring in some people as panelists from our audience if they want to raise the question. But I will go to our ambassador, Vesco Garcevic, who probably will bring us a little bit more north and west by giving us a Western Balkan perspective, or a Montenegrin perspective, or a former Yugoslav perspective. So Vesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Petros. But I have to say, I would disappoint you. At least at the beginning of my intervention.
You never disappoint me.
I won't be speaking about the Balkans, Western Balkans. In fact, my idea was, as I understood the panel, to be reflective on what we have discussed over the week. And maybe given that I'm surrounded by energy experts and energy is not my cup of tea, I would focus on, thinking about energy, I would focus on geopolitics in the region. And at one point, I will raise the question about where the European Union stands in that game. So when it comes to energy, and definitely I will make a couple of points about the Western Balkans. It goes without saying. So when it comes to energy, energy security, I would say that two methods are popular and how energy security is perceived and examined. And we, I think, during our seminar, actually touched upon both of them, discussed energy security from both perspectives. First of all, I would say the energy security is mostly discussed from the perspective of how energy influence states' ability to function, which means from the point of view of vulnerability. And our panel, Western Balkans panel, highlighted energy vulnerability as a segment of the overall economic and political instability in the region these days. That instability is exacerbated by current energy crisis, as we outlined. Also, we outlined, structural challenges that cause lasting troubles in not just in energy sector, but in the region, and how region has become susceptible to the influence of so-called third parties. But energy is also can be discussed from the balance of power point of view, which means energy is not about just a threat to those who are most vulnerable or threat to those who want to protect their, let's say, preferable status in energy markets or in a certain region. It is also an opportunity for countries who seem to be the upper hand or want to be at the upper hand in energy market or in the region. So when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean, we outlined several players, in the theater, and we also highlighted the current power dynamics and that the changes in energy flow creates a new geopolitical environment, giving chances to some, or at least in their eyes, they see this as an opportunity. One of them is definitely Turkey, who is playing a dangerous game with the aim to remodel the existing distribution of regional power. And another one is, let's say, the revival of a powerful return of Russia. And in my view, it's amazing how Moscow has regained its influence in the region, given the limited resources and its posture just 15 years ago. I just want to remind you that Russia, before the war in Syria broke out, had only one military facility, in the region. It was a naval facility in Tartus, Syria. But ever since, it developed its relation with Egypt. Last year, for example, Egypt and Russia signed a cooperation protocol that covers different military and security aspects. And this is just an end of, let's say, 6 years long cooperation between two countries. Then also, Russia signed an agreement with Cyprus to give Russian Navy ships access to Cyprus ports in 2015. Then finally, Russia has been doing well in Libya through its proxies. And it likes the fact that few seem to notice it or to speak about it. For example, Russia keeps itself below radar when it comes to Libya, but its influence is much higher than it may look at the first glance. So then we also discussed financially powerful actors like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, who are trying to seize their opportunity sitting in the back seat, and not just in the Western Balkans, as we discussed, through the project they finance or their other, not just in the energy sector. Then there is another one, in the theater, a new powerful player in the theater. It is China, and intentions of China and impact on the regional dynamic is yet to be measured. Finally, several protracted conflicts in the region, like one in conflicts or outstanding issues, let's call it like that. Conflicts in Libya, and then Israel, then Lebanon, then Cyprus. So, and maybe political instability in Tunisia and fragile stability in Egypt. That also, all these, when put together, actually create the stage where energy is perceived by regional and external actors as a tool to advance their national agendas. So against this backdrop, then one may pose a question, where does the European Union stand in this equation? And I'm thankful for this morning discussion because it inspired me to maybe deeply, to think more deeply about that. So in my opinion, the view, its role of the European Union is continuously challenged by external actors, regional and global. And I would say, as we agreed this morning, European Union seems not to be prepared for this new type of the game. So I would outline two questions when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean from my perspective, but there are many more than that too, that European Union, have problem dealing with or are important for European Union at this moment. First of all, one of the biggest question is how to deal with Turkey. Because the stakes are high for both countries, for both the European Union and Turkey in this part of the world, and stakes are not only in energy sector. So we all can agree that European Union and and Ankara, never been at least honest partners in the European Union accession process. And European Union leaders and institutions have always seen Ankara as a difficult partner. But currently, Brussels is faced with the challenge how to strike a balance in its approach with Turkey. So, as Professor Phillips rightly said, Turkey is too large to be ignored, and its strategic importance, particularly security importance for NATO, is undisputable. So, an unstable or unhinged Turkey outside NATO would send shockwaves across the continent. So therefore, this is always in mind of people sitting, let's say, in Brussels or in the European Union. At the same time, as you know well, in 2009, 2008, 2020, the situation in relations between the two deteriorated rapidly, and at one point, relationship seemed to be advancing towards a state of conflictual cooperation. So the current state of play, one can describe as a fragile truce, because both parties understand that, they should not go further in conflictual relationship, given the importance that each of them have for other one. So, but the question that is floating in the air is, can a NATO ally and candidate for accession also be an adversary for European Union? And if it is, how to deal with it and how to protect interests of European Union member states in southeastern flank of European Union, and whether European Union is ready to do so, and how much is ready to go, how far is ready to go in protecting interests of countries like Cyprus or Greece. Then the second issue is how to avoid being sidelined by other global actors. So it seems the European Union, when it comes to this part of the world, it's never been weaker, and national politics or national interests of largest Euro members. But when it comes to Eastern European, this part of the Mediterranean, definitely I count on Italy as one of important actors. So their national interests and national politics override what's supposed to be a common European Union approach, and it is visible. Both previous, panelists mentioned, and I know that they are much better fit to discuss this at length than me, mentioned what happened lately with the Eastern land gas pipeline, but how U.S. reacted and what happened, I would not discuss now because I don't feel how to say competent to discuss this project itself. But reaction of the U.S. highlights vulnerability of European Union in this field. And a couple of points about Western Balkans, since you, how to say, called me to say something about that. Definitely, unlike Eastern Mediterranean, at least at the first glance, European Union in the Western Balkans seems to be the leading actor But in spite of the fact that it is the largest investor and the trade partner of Western Balkan states, and that all of them want to be members of European Union, and there is something called the Thessaloniki agenda still in place. European Union seems to be losing its power currency, which means soft power in the region, and it is changed by Russia, and how time goes on, more and more by China. To balance influence, European Union and Western Balkans agreed on Green Agenda Action Plan in 2020, and according to the action plan, that should be brought 9 billion euros in grants to this region. And the last year in Slovenia, this action plan has been enhanced with additional 20 billion in investments. Sounds and looks very nice and promising, but personally, I'm not so optimistic because, you know, as you know, Western Balkans countries, first of all, needs to embark upon reforms in this area and to meet criteria to get eligible to use these grants. As far as I know, European Union expects countries in the region to design and propose what they call, what they describe, mature quality projects to be financed under this plan. Just a point, and that's my final point, when it comes to, you know, deposits, you know, of gas and petroleum in all parts of the world, which means in Adriatic Sea. I don't know how much you followed exploration taking place in Montenegro. Closer to the end of 2021, you know, media reported about alleged discovery of a large quantity of high quality petroleum and gas deposits by consortium of Italian and Russian companies, Eni and Novatek. But as it stands right now, this is challenged, and I'm not sure that what they found is profitable for exploitation. But as I said, I'm not an expert in this and I cannot comment on it. I think that maybe my colleagues can do this better than me. I will stop here, and as I promised, I touch upon Balkans and ready to answer questions concerning that if we have any.
Like I said, you never disappoint. Yeah, I think, you know, overall, I mean, there are a couple of questions in the box, but overall, I would say that there was almost like in three phases of this energy and policy conundrum that we are facing. And now climate, you know, we've moved climate from a challenge, you know, the changing climate to a climate crisis, you know, and that's the sort of like the white elephant, if you wish, you know, dealing with it. And we sort of like adopted a language that's not also feasible. I think we're like very early on. And the three phases that I'm referring to is, you know, about 30 years ago when the Soviet Union collapsed and energy and the source of energy that the Soviet Union provided became sort of like an open space. There was a lot of speculation in how everybody was just where everybody's going to be positioning themselves. And we spent almost a decade in discussing the Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline that finally comes into being in the early, so this is remembers, and you know, finally coming into being in the early 2000s. And then we went to the high speculation, you know, the point that Vesco was just making about Montenegro, you know, any kind of like a discovery, you know, people then begin to like say, okay, we have trillions and gazillions, you know, cubic meters of gas, and it's going to liberate us. And here we are, another Saudi Arabia in the Adriatic, you know, everybody's going to be rich, you know, that kind of a thing. And then, you know, what with Konstantinos, you know, very accurately mentioned in the fact that, you know, here we are, we have really matured in the way that we're looking at it. And we're using words like feasibility, market, you know, could you do it? So like, you know, the minute like the Aphrodite field came on and we found out about Aphrodite, it was like Aphrodite's dilemma. Does that like, you know, what does it do? And it leads you to like a extreme politics in some ways, you know, which we could have like, you know, all this perceptions and misperception and traps. And it appears right now that we are in a sort of like sobering um, area where more realistic political decisions could be made. And then there's like, okay, well, what do we do with Turkey? You know, what do we do with this giant that's here that you can't really ignore, so to speak? So it forces you to those challenges where, you know, you have to sit down at the table. And I think Sotiris mentions the whole idea that you could have a collective security arrangement, even though you might have a protracted problem. We've seen this in the past. So some of the things that we are left with is how much of this challenging environment that we're in right now could also become an opportunity. That we all know exactly where we are. We have all like hit ourselves against the wall. So all those things that we like, you know, imagine, and all those, you know, summer night dreams that we had are not longer feasible. So realistically, what is it that we can do? You know, and that also goes to the issues of sustainability and renewables, because we have like adopted this language that's so superficial, and everything that we paint with the color green, we assume that it's much better. And, you know, it becomes like a marketing packaging thing. But then, is it possible? But then could you also do it? You know, we saw that yesterday, Professor Ambassador Abiram talk about, you know, bringing us back to the last summer, the floods in Turkey, the floods in Europe, the great fires in Evia, the fires across the Mediterranean. So that's the sort of like, you know, the reality of our situation today. You know, the policy to address A, our limitations, and B, the threats that we are facing. So we can go with Sotiris and Konstantinos and Vesco, and there are a couple of questions, and I'm sure like Mr. Danis also has a question or two, so it will take us to the rest of our discussion. Sotiris, you want to?
Yes, that's I want to say a story about discoveries and you know, energy, all this stuff. I remember when there was the Kosovo issue and there was the U.S. NATO intervention in Kosovo. There was a big conspiracy theory and debate actually on the Greek TV talk shows about rare earth in Kosovo, and that what was the purpose of the Americans in intervening in Kosovo? It was the rare earth. This is was
metals.
The rare earth metals. Yes, that was the case. That is actually something. Of course, it is. It sounds absurd, but it was part of the public debate in major media outlets in Greece, and I suppose in other Balkan states, perhaps. I don't know. I don't have information about it. But this kind of discovering, you know, gas, discovering oil, discovering rare earth metals, whatever, uranium, in the Balkans and the Eastern Mediterranean is you know, is a mirage that is coming back and again. And actually, the most alarming issue is that sometimes state strategies, foreign policy strategies, are based on these mirages. I mean, it's a long discussion how they construct this mirage, how they construct these discourses, and why these myths are becoming so powerful. But and this was my objections to EastMed right from the beginning, that it was not based on real on reality, actually, on pragmatic elements. And I think this is a very important thing. It's not happening only in Greece. It's happening in Cyprus, for example. It's happening in Egypt to a certain extent. It's happening in Turkey to a certain extent. It's happening in Albania to a certain extent. It happens with Greece because we are going around searching the ground for rich oil resources in the northeastern Aegean, in the Ionian, in the southern part of Crete. So it is something that we have to take care of it and to I mean, as academics, we have to examine how and why this kind of discourse, this kind of myths are constructed, how they are constructed, and why they're so powerful in actually directing policies or being basis for strategies in the area. This is one very important element that I would like to share. The second is that Konstantinos mentioned it, but I think it's very important. We have an energy crisis in Europe now, shortage, high prices, and everything, and we have the biggest, the second biggest natural gas producer in the world out of the market. Iran is out of the market. I mean, Europe is without energy. It is dependent on the Russian energy with great, very important political repercussions on Europe's security and on relations with Russia, and I think Europe is doing nothing. I think nothing in order to resolve the standoff between United States and Iran in the case of the nuclear program and on this case on the issue of the sanctions. It is, I think it is absurdity to discuss about gas, and having the second biggest producer out of the market. I don't know whether prices will be lower than it is today. I think they are. I suppose they are. But and this is something that we have also to discuss, because it is an issue for the relationship of the transatlantic relationship. What is happening in Europe now, it's not only the fault of Russians. Of course, Russians are pressing upon the Europeans to accept their terms and all the stuff, but it's also part of the inability to have gas from Iran. And this is something that it is a transatlantic. To my view, it's a major transatlantic issue.
Yeah, I think without a doubt. I mean, I think that's a very important point. Konstantinos, you want to add something, or we can't hear
Sure.
you?
Okay. I just muted myself. So, following what Sotiris has just said, it is really absurd from a European perspective to have Iran excluded from the energy equation when it comes to natural gas. Iran is the only country that can compete with Russia in terms of quantities and capacity. Even if we add up the volumes of all other alternatives to Russia, the Eastern Mediterranean, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, which is not so plausible to see Turkmenistan supplying the European market. It is mainly directed to China in the Asian market. US LNG, Algeria, they cannot compete with Russia, even if we add all these volumes up. Another hypocrisy or peculiarity on behalf of the Europeans is that when the two crises between Russia and Ukraine erupted in 2005 and 2008, the main goal for the Europeans, and they were encouraged by the Americans, was to lessen their dependence on Russia. Back then, in terms of percentage, the Europeans were consuming 30% of the natural gas that they were consuming was coming from Russia. Do you know what is the percentage nowadays? 42%.
Wow.
So in 15 years, instead of lessening their dependence, they increased it. And one of the main reasons has been, of course, that Iran was excluded after Trump decided to withdraw from the agreement. And there is, of course, Sotiris know a lot better developments in Iran and regarding Iran. There is an agreement between Iran and China. I honestly don't know whether it will materialize or not, but what I can say is that it is of major importance from Tehran from an economic perspective. And let me also stress that even if we, by miracle, see Iran coming back on the game and start negotiations with the European Union to feed our market, it will take at least 5, if not close to a decade, years or close to a decade, because it needs to modernize its infrastructure. And before 7 to 10 years, it will not be in a position to supply the European market. Another highlight of the hypocritical position of Germany in our case is the Nord Stream. Again, when we had the crisis, the two crises between Russia and Ukraine, the Russians proposed a southern bypass to Ukraine through South Stream. The Germans really opposed this plan as a plan which was undermining European Union's solidarity, and it was undermining European Union's unity. What was the end result? That nowadays we have two Nord Stream projects bypassing Ukraine, only that it comes from the northern part of Ukraine, not the southern part, and connecting directly Russia with Germany. So for the Germans, South Stream was a plan against European interests, but Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 are two plans against European interests, but supporting German interests. So when it comes to energy, and I'm going to conclude with that, Petros, we have to be pragmatic. It is a matter of national security. It is a very, very sensitive issue for each country. So there is no unity around. It gives third countries like Russia, Turkey, maybe in the US, maybe in the future Iran, the ability to follow this divide and conquer policy vis-a-vis the EU.
Yeah, and I think that even the time that we've seen each other, I go back to Tinos in 2014. I think our conversations as far as energy is concerned have changed over that time and have become a lot more realistic. In that time, even in that space. And I think that's an encouraging sign, because if you do have realistic expectations and limitations, then you avoid many of the traps of maximalist policies, or then within the placement of what it is. And even having the discussion about Iran today is something that it's a major departure, even from an American perspective, which it seemed to be Iran was just out there in that space, and not realize that Iran is this keystone state that holds the region together and gives you a completely different leveraging in the geopolitical framework of it. So I couldn't agree more.
Petros, can I make another comment? And also remind you that I have to leave in a couple of minutes. Yes. Regarding Greece. Greece started its energy program in 2011 with the famous Maniatis law, because back then my good friend Danis Maniatis was Minister of Energy. We are in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So for over 11 years, there hasn't been a single search, drilling operation in Greece's continent. Not even one in over a decade.
Yeah.
And I'm just bringing this up because we spoke about maximalism and unrealistic expectations. I can still recall, and I'm sure Sotiris does the same, In 2010, when we entered into the memoranda, it was the first memorandum. Many Greek politicians claiming that this was an attempt by the Germans to take over the wealth, our hydrocarbons wealth. And this was the main reason why we were forced to sign the first memorandum, because they wanted to exploit our energy wealth.
Well, I know we have to go, and I realize that, and I'm going to give yield the floor a little bit to Mr. Danis, who has been a great supporter and sponsor of all this. And, I think it's due that to him and his support and his vision that we're putting all this together, and for the students that are really the beneficiaries of all of this and our participants. Mr. Danis.
I want to express my appreciation to all of the panelists and the participants. And this is really a very educational and analyzation of what is happening, both and the interruption and the entanglement of strategic, economic, climate, and energy all in one. And whether it's Iraq, whether it's Greece vis-a-vis Turkey, and whether it is Germany and Russia, all of them together create a very serious, intricate issue and policy that can be only resolved by the negotiation and the getting together as a consortium, both strategically as well as economically. Because all the issues that I hear, it's all appropriately in the nationalistics, and they will not change just because we talk about it. And whether it's economy in Germany going from 30 to 42%, and whether it's China going after Iran, and whether we have cut Iran out of the market due to the ambitions of nuclear weapons. All of these things will continue on, and I'm delighted to hear that we are on top of it. And I want to thank Professor Vamvakas for organizing this and everybody participating. It's an honor to be here and listening and learning more about our strategic, economic, climate issues and energy that is the key and the foundation of humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a one question in the a couple of questions in there. I'm going to try to summarize and try to make sure that we address it, and maybe we can end a little early and then answer the questions as well, so we accommodate everybody. And the question has to do with the whole idea of this climate change and how it instigates conflicts by creating this refugees, the climate refugees. And I think that the author of the question also raises a good point by raising the demographic issue and saying a country like Nigeria, for instance, by 2050, it's going to be about just bare 40 million less people than the EU has today. So that definitely creates a problem. So this climate change, refugee waves, and the EU demography decline. And we saw a little bit of that earlier in the week when we got the census from Bulgaria, that they had the largest drop by 11% over the last decade. And what does that do? So the question is, does that affect the overall situation as far as what we see as policy in the future? So yes, Vesco, you can go.
I wanted just to make a comment. That's a very good question. Although we didn't touch upon at length and discuss at length this issue of forced migration and displacement, population the displacement, but definitely it's going to be like a security issue in the years to come, in decades to come. I just want to support let's say the question and to highlight how important it is, because it has a repercussion on number of issues, including security, governance, and at the end of the day, democracy, and the way how we're going to deal with it. The World Bank in 2018 made a research on this issue and published report about this question. And according to this report, which is, I think, it's titled "Preparing for International Climate Migration," they predict as many as 150 million people, displacement of as many as 150 million people by 2050 due the climate change related issues like a sea level rise, crop failure, or one of the hotspots. There are 3 hotspots according to the report: South Asia, then Latin America, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So according to the reports, around 90 million people are expected to move out from Sub-Saharan Africa as a consequence of climate change. And I'm sure that this population displacement will it will make like an effect on Europe for sure, because as we can see right now, the number of refugees or the number of immigrants will grow in the years to come, and Europe will be faced with issue how to deal with the population displacement and how to accommodate the rise of people coming into on the continent. I'm not saying either against or for. What I'm saying is that what European Union or Europe as a continent, or not just Europe, but we are speaking now on Eastern Mediterranean Europe, should develop mechanisms to manage that type of crisis, unprecedented crisis or unprecedented phenomena in modern times. And the question for the generations to come.
Yeah, I agree. And Professor Diadiki mentioned it the other day in the panel that, was leading on immigration yesterday. Ms. Laura Portentis from Homeland Security and the cybersecurity issues that were brought up, and we had a nice discussion. I know my good friend Konstantinos has to go. First of all, I want to thank you, Konstantinos, personally, and as the representative of both Idis and
add something.
Yes, and absolutely. I want to make sure that you will go to your next.
No. I prefer that I hear Sotiris and then I will reply.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just trying to accommodate. That's all.
Yeah.
Sotiris.
As long as Sotiris is short in his answer, I really want to hear him.
Well, I said about desertification. We have to bear in mind that perhaps, let's say in 2050, Nigeria will be over 300 million people. The northern of countries north of Nigeria are hit by desertification very, very strongly. And so the whole states are collapsing. That means that jihadist groups like Boko Haram and others may have hinterland for organizing them, for having safe haven in failed states. So all this is can be put together in a very I would say difficult future. Also, we have the floods in Niger and in the Nile. So we have other issues that destroy agricultural land, which also creates more problems and exacerbates the inequalities. So the end result is that nowadays the European Union, what it's doing is to finance militias in Libya under the name and that under the label of Coast Guard, which is not the Coast Guard. It's various militias that are running detention camps in order to, in a way, chase and imprison refugees or let's say migrants. This is not useful. This is not a far-reaching policy. Europe should understand that investments should be made, billions of if we don't want to have a new, bigger migration, let's say, flows, to make more projects, more investments on how to deal with the desertification, how to deal with floods in the Sahel area and the Western Africa. Otherwise, the situation will be much worse, and no militia, no Libyan militia will stop migrants if they are coming by millions, not by thousands.
Thank you. Constantino, now it's you.
Okay, so for Europe, the migration issue, and I fully subscribe to what Mr. Massaoutis, if I'm not mistaken, has said about the explosive cocktail. Climate crisis, migration, terrorism, of course, authoritarian regimes, I would add. We do know nowadays that refugees are not produced simply by wars. We are not that lucky, if I may, and excuse me if you feel that this is a provocative statement, but I wish it would be only wars that were producing refugees. It is a much deeper issue that has to do, of course, with poverty, with the climate crisis, with authoritarian regimes, and of course the demographics. The Europeans seem to feel that for now, at least, they are on the safe side because they have created buffer zones in tackling the migration problem, the migration challenge. The first buffer zone are the countries of origin. We provide them with money, and through a magical way that has not yet been found, we feel that these authoritarian regimes, in most cases, are going to channel the money in a way that will curb poverty. That is not happening. The second buffer zone are the countries, the neighboring countries. As long as we keep migrants and refugees far away and close to their country of origin, the hope is that they will return to their countries one way or the other at some time in the future. This is, for instance, why we are paying Turkey to keep more than 3.5 million Syrians in its soil. Because if the Syrians go into Germany, there is no way they're going to go back to Syria. As long as they are in Turkey, we have the hope that sometime they will go back home. And the third buffer zone are the countries, the EU countries of first entry. For now, it is Greece, Italy, Malta to a lesser extent, and Spain. Maybe in the future, it's going to be Poland, for instance, like it happened actually a month ago with Belarus. So we feel that through this this way, which is not effective, that we are secure enough with this challenge. We have to think out of the box. The demographics are leave us no room for not realizing realities, for not realizing the obvious, that we need migration waves as Europe if we want to keep up with competition coming from China and the US. It can't go otherwise. I'm going to stop here, just saying that I am really, although I am really pro-European, I'm really disappointed with the way the European Union is handling most of the crisis, not only in Syria, in Libya, where actually it has no voice, but even in the Balkans, as we have Vesco with us. Let me say that it is really disappointing for me, the fact that the Europeans are approaching the Balkans like a medium abroad territory, if not a distant region, and not like a place which is located within the European continent. And of course, the more room for maneuver Europe leaves to other countries, the more third countries like China, Russia, Turkey are going to intervene and be active within the Balkan region.
Well, thank you very much. And as I said earlier today, Vesco, you have something? You want to add something?
Just a comment as far as what Konstantinos and Sophie have said. I fully agree. I think when it comes to European Union, maybe from a broader, more general perspective, I think that European Union sometimes resembles a person who is nicely tucked in their home, very, very comfortable home, and they don't want anybody or anything to come and to disturb them. So they don't think that I will use something very old joke from even like a prehistory when communism existed, joke very popular in my former country, Yugoslavia. Even if you don't go, you want to go to USSR, USSR will come to you. So so that the same logic can apply here. Konstantinos, you rightly said that Balkans and Ukraine, for example, though I cannot compare these two, given their perspective, let's say, at least on the paper, when it comes to European Union membership, are seen as like a periphery, close periphery, while like North Africa or Middle East, in the minds of many Europeans, particularly Western Europeans, are seen as like a distant periphery, which is not the case. I fully agree with what Sotiris said. If European Union doesn't change, shift fundamentally the way how it perceives itself and its role in, at least in this, like not globally, but in this like a region, broader region, and invest more in North Africa, and understand that by keeping people just outside of the European Union, like in Turkey or in Libya, or tomorrow it can be, I don't know, Montenegro or in Serbia nowadays, or Bosnia and Herzegovina, is not the way to deal with crisis.
Well, again, I couldn't thank you all enough for what you contributed today in our conversation, and your support on what we've done at Emmanuel College and at the Institute of Eastern Mediterranean Studies. Of course, I want to thank the Karamanlis Chair and the Fletcher School, and Dr. Arvanitopoulos and Konstantinos Filis and Idis and Diri and Antonia Kolibasanu, who's not here with us, and hopefully she recovers well from her bout with COVID. Of course, Georgie Danis and his support over the last couple of years. My sincere wish that the 14 students that have participated throughout this week really got something out of this seminar, and the rest of the participants that have come in and out. I'm forever grateful. Thank you all very much. Have a very lovely day, and try to stay warm if you're in Boston, and enjoy the evening if you're on the other side of the Mediterranean. Goodbye. Thank you.